Welcome to our Sound for Video session. Today is the 8th of March, 2020. Got to take those off. I was just doing a sound check there, and there's enough latency that's going to drive me crazy. So just want to do a quick sound check here, make sure everything's going okay. From what I can hear on the signal chain, things should be good. All right. And let's go ahead and jump in. So a couple of things that I wanted to do today. First of all, we're going to cover some questions that were submitted ahead of time, and we have some good ones. And then, of course, anything that comes up in the chat, we'll cover those as well. Just a status update on a few things. Number one, kind of big news. Actually, we'll hold off on that. We'll cover our questions here first. So, all right. Let's see here. All right, sounding good. Let's go ahead and jump in then. I'm going to switch over to the Mac here, and we're going to jump into our questions. First question from Klaus is, what file format is industry standard when working with location sound? Is it still .wav, or is it .bwf or .bwav? Slowly taking over, and what are the benefits? So the first, that's a good question. I think most of the modern recorders, the SD card recorders, or any sort of recorders that record to media at this point digitally are using broadcast wave format. However, what's interesting about the broadcast wave format is that it's, in most cases, it still has the .wav extension on it. So even though, say for example, a Zoom F-Series recorder or a Sound Devices Mix Pre recorder or even a Sound Devices or a Zaxcom, well, Zaxcom may be a different story because it's a little more complex there, but because they're using a proprietary format in addition to WAV, but any of those will save it as .wav, but it is storing it as a broadcast wave. Now, a broadcast wave is essentially an extension of the WAV format, and the main difference is that it allows you to store more metadata, so more information about the context of that sound file. So, for example, when you have a Sound Devices Mix Pre or a Zoom F-Series, you can enter metadata. You can enter notes. You can indicate whether it's a good take or not. You can do all sorts of things like that, and that's all metadata that's stored in the broadcast wave format. So Klaus has a great question, and so the answer is that yes, broadcast wave is very much taken over, and the kind of the trick or the nuance is that it's still often using the .wav extension. All right, next up, also from Klaus, how do you store and maintain your microphones, cleaning, and so on? Let's switch back over to the camera here. What I want to do is let's talk first about storage. Obviously, most microphones are going to come with some sort of storage. So here's one of the Rode shotguns. It comes in this sort of plastic leather, faux leather case. That's one thing. So I'll almost always keep those. I don't toss those out. Although I've noticed the latest generation of them come and they smell horrible. It's like they need to air out for a while. As far as lavaliers, all the pro-level lavaliers will come in some sort of case, has been my experience. So here's Countryman, Sanken, Voice Technologies, Shure. So they all come in various cases. So I will store them in those as well as transport them in those. And then when, of course, it comes to the other microphones, here's my DPA 4017B, for example. Comes in this kind of semi-hard case. It's well padded. So that's generally what you can expect there. Now, there are some less expensive microphones. Well, actually, before we get to those, of course, here's the Sennheiser MKH416. I was a little underwhelmed when I first saw this case. It's all plastic, and it just has these kind of plastic hinges. And I feel like those are going to break at some point, but they've held up so far. But in any case, so usually the pro-level mics will come with a case, and I just store them in those inside of a set of drawers I have from IKEA. So that's what I'm doing in my case. Now, one consideration is that, and we'll get to this in just a second, one consideration is that if you're in I'm in a very dry climate, so it's very arid here, so I don't have to worry a whole lot about humidity. If you are in a humid environment, that's a consideration. You will want to store things in a dry place. So down in your damp basement may not be the best place, depending on what's available to you. So that's a consideration as well. Now, the trick is with the more consumer-oriented microphones. This is at the time, I'm working on a review of this one right here. This is a Sonal, and this one comes in at, I think, $80 presently. The normal price is $100, but it does not come with a case. You get this cardboard box that it comes in with this foam insert. So you're kind of on your own, and so in this case, I think this is all on loan from B&H, so I'm not going to keep this one, but if I were keeping this one, I'd probably, I mean, it's funny because it's, it's a $100 microphone, so do you want to invest another $100 in a, like a small Pelican case to store it? I don't know. That's the trick with when you get into the more consumer-oriented. What I can say about this one is what I appreciate about the company is they didn't invest a lot of money in a case. They invested everything in the microphone so you can get the most for your money on the microphone, but then it is up to you to figure out how to store that. So that's one thing I can tell you about storage. Now, in terms of cleaning, this is what I've been using for cleaning. It's a adhesive remover called Unisolve. It's actually it's a medical type cleaner. And it comes in little packets like this. So this box has 50 wipes in it. I use this in particular for lavalier microphones after they've been worn. I think it's critical to wash or clean your lavaliers after you've used them on an actor, because they sweat. They're working hard on their performance. You'd often have it attached to their skin or their clothing. They have to sometimes take bathroom breaks, and who knows what happens in those circumstances. It's critical to clean them, and so this is what I've been using here. So it does have some. Let's see. I know that it has some aloe in it to kind of keep things from getting too dried out, but it also has some isopropyl alcohol, dipropylene glycol methyl ether, which is starting to make me a little nervous. In any case, so that's what I've been using, and I've had pretty good luck with that so far. So again, that's Unisolve is what I've been using. If you guys have other things, a lot of people will just use isopropyl or rubbing alcohol to clean them. The problem with that is over time it can dry the cabling out in particular. So that's something to watch for. If your microphone head is not water resistant, you have to be a little careful. The nice thing about the wipes is they're not too damp, so you usually can't do any sort of damage there, but just be careful not to get any, to drip any inside the capsule itself. You want to avoid that. So that's what I've been doing, and hopefully that helps and makes some sense there. So let's go ahead and switch back over to our questions here. Thanks for that, Klaus. All right, next up. Hey, Curtis, and happy Women's Day. Happy Women's Day to you as well. I would like to ask about boom operating solutions. I am not physically so strong. Is there any tool that I can use in order to operate the mic with a boom pole, except lightweight poles, etc.? That is a really good question. Let me just do this here. Let me say a couple of things about this. Number one, I think a misconception that a lot of people have, and I found this a practical way, but I've also heard it from other boom pole or boom operators like Alan Williams, who has the Sound Speeds YouTube channel. That is a misconception that when you're holding a boom pole, you always hold it in the H position above your head. And the reality is, in my experience, you're not going to be able to do that for very long unless you are super fit. And even then, at some point the blood runs out of your hands and arms, and you just can't sustain that for very long. So I actually don't do that a lot. What I often do, and fortunately I'm tall, so it helps me, but there are also other things you can do, is I'll typically kind of tuck my elbows in and hold it like this. And in most cases with the framing that we're working with, that's not going to be a problem. I can get the microphone up high enough without cutting the corner of the frame. But if you're not particularly tall, what you can get is an Apple box to stand on. And an Apple box they can be expensive, but they're sturdy and they're reliable, and they will last you an entire career most likely, unless they get thrown off of a 20-story building or something like that. But that is definitely something to consider. So that's one thing. Now, there are some other things here. Let me switch over back to the screen here on the Mac. There is something to consider called a boom hanger. This might help or might not. If you have a harness that you're using when you're booming, you can connect this to your harness and it becomes another point to hold on to the boom pole. Then you kind of distribute the weight. Let's see if we can get a bigger picture of that. You can see it distributes the weight onto your harness, and then you only have to use one arm. So it's a good way to kind of rest one arm for a period of time. And anyway, that's what that looks like right there. So again, you have to have a shoulder harness for that. And That's one worth considering as well. Now, one other thing, if you are doing long interviews, I think it's absolutely critical to have one of these. This particular one's called the Boom Boy from Remote Audio. This is a boom pole holder that you can put onto a C-stand. So the metal part that's exposed down here at the bottom goes into the grip head on a C-stand, and then you can put the boom pole up on the C-stand. So if you're not actively cueing between actors, this is a critical thing to have as well. I think that pretty much everyone that's doing boom operating should have one of these in their kit. And you should have at least one C-stand, preferably more if you can. So those are some thoughts there in regards to what you can use to help kind of ease that. It can be those can be long days, really long days, even if you are physically strong. So hopefully that information gives you a little bit of some insight into what you can do there. All right, next up from Rob, as I have been using my Tascam DR60D Mark II and AT2020 to record voiceovers, but I'm wondering if I can get a lower noise floor recording using my Behringer UMC22 USB interface connected to my Chromebook. And Chromebook with an asterisk. I don't know if that's to represent a trademark or what that is. How can I measure the noisiness of my field recorder versus my USB interface? Fine question. I think really that's a practical question. And what I'd recommend, Rob, is actually just do a recording in the exact same room, one with the Tascam, one with the Behringer. Bring those into Adobe Audition or whatever app you're using. Get them to the same loudness. So if you're using Adobe Audition, that's really easy. You drop it into the match loudness panel, get them both up to, if they're mono, go to -26 LUFS. Listen, then you can measure. Also, when you do the recordings, leave a silent section so you can measure the noise floor, the practical noise floor, and then measure them. Just highlight the silent section, go into the amplitude statistics panel, click on the measure button, and that will give you, I would look at the RMS value there, and you can see. So if you're, then of course it's always critical to use your ears as well. So even though one may have a lower noise floor than the other, technically by measuring it that way, one of them may have more noise at a frequency that's more annoying. So use your ears to help identify that. It's also good in Adobe Audition to turn on the frequency analysis panel. So go up to, I think it's the window menu or the view menu, the one right before help, and put a check mark next to frequency analysis and play it back. And if you've got any, play back the silent portion. And if you have any sections, like there's huge spikes sticking up at a certain frequency, that could be a clue that maybe you have a problem there. So those are some thoughts I have in terms of how to measure the difference in terms of noise floor on those two items. So hope that helps. Thanks, Rob, for the question. All right, heading back over to our questions here. Dick has a question. I have a question about the Sound Devices 888. The power switch has a green and blue light, power indication of load of the Accu and power of the timecode from a smart battery. Is it possible to power the battery and timecode with switch of the flickering lights? I have to confess, Dick, I don't quite understand the question. However, let me just get my 888 and show you what I do know about it in terms of the powering. So give me just a second here. Okay, so here we have our 888. In this case, we're powered by these external smart batteries. I'll go ahead and turn it on. Let that power up. This is a good test here. You can see the blue light comes on. Okay, the timecode generator was reset. Now I'm going to go into the power menu here really quickly. So we have here a variety of different batteries. Bat 1 and Bat 2 are the Sony L series batteries that are on the back of the unit in the battery sleds. And then the DC is this here. Actually, it's both of these that are feeding into the battery distribution system here. So that's what we're looking at. And then this fourth battery here is the timecode battery. That timecode battery is inside the 888. And these other batteries charge it. It is a rechargeable battery, so the way that it works is once you can see now that it's red, but what's happening is these other batteries are powering or charging this one right now, and we'll give it just a few minutes here. I think I don't know what its target voltage is, but as that charges up, once it'll get to a point, in fact, let's try it now. Let's go ahead and power down and see if it's powered. So you can see green here means that we're all good. We have plenty of power from whatever source it's coming from. When I turn this off, yeah, we're getting this blue flash. That means that we have enough charge on the Timecode, internal Timecode battery to keep the Timecode counting. And so that's what that indicates. So I'm not sure which part of that you're asking about in particular, Dick, but if you could help clarify that, maybe we can get you an answer. But that's my understanding of how the 888, the 833, and the Scorpio all work in terms of working with the different batteries here. Now you notice it's blue, which okay, now it changed to green. So that means it's charging up that battery again. So there's some thoughts there, Dick. I'm not sure if there was something else in particular you meant on that, but definitely clarify if there was something we missed there. All right, and let's go to the last one. We have some really pretty good news here. This is the news that I'm excited about. Switching back over. Scott sent a note over. I did see that Blackmagic Design released a new version of DaVinci Resolve, and that's the 16.2 version, and evidently Resolve 16.2 now provides support for decoding 32-bit float point audio. Now, I need to see what that means. And I'm going to dive into that a little bit over the next little bit here to see exactly what the practical implications are of that. There are lots of different things that can mean. Now, and the reason I say that is in an application that processes audio, digital audio workstation like DaVinci Resolve or Adobe Audition, Pro Tools, whatever it may be, there's 32-bit float full pipeline support where it's supported throughout the entire application, and there is decoding support. And I'm not sure what they've done here. So what's possible, and I need to check, is in some cases what I've seen is some apps will bring in a 32-bit float audio file and basically convert it to 24-bit, and that's what you get. So the problem with that is that if you are doing a 32-bit float recording on a MixPre 2 series or a Zoom F6, and you have exceeded 0 dB full scale, that information is going to be lost if it's doing just a very simple decode like that. So that's what I need to jump into and take a look, but we'll be back with more information on that. But that's exciting news. It looks like DaVinci, or that Blackmagic Design has definitely seen the message. They've heard the message, which is we want 32-bit float support throughout the application. So if this is not that entirely, at least it's a step in that direction. So we'll have more information on that. I did go check at the Sound Devices website where they used to indicate that Resolve did not support 32-bit float. They now have an indicator that says not tested. So I think they've seen the news as well, and they're working on that as well. So more information to come on that here in the next little bit. All right, let's jump back into the chat and see what we've got going here today. Alexander first, let's go ahead and pop this up on the screen here, asked for a review of the Comica Boom XD. Possibly. I can't commit to that for sure. They have actually contacted me. I have a history with Comica that's not a good history. I think they treated me pretty badly, and so I'm a little bit hesitant to do much in terms of reviews with their work. So I felt like they kind of deceived me and made me pay for a product that they misrepresented. So in any case, I might do it, but I might not. I apologize, Alexander. We'll see if we can do it, but no promises. All right, Trevor has got the Rick Veers Location Sound Bible in hand, and a bowl of popcorn in the left hand, and a live stream coming. You must be in heaven, Trevor. Happy Sunday to you. And thanks, Mr. Kevin, for joining. It's good to have you here. Please keep it down in the peanut gallery there. I know you sometimes are the leader in the peanut gallery. Let's be on our best behavior, pal. Just kidding. All right. Let's see. We've got Bugs here. Welcome. Mark Randall is here. And Klaus. I hope, Klaus, we were able to address your question there. That's a good one. You've got a lot of good questions. Thanks for submitting those, especially ahead of time. Appreciate that. All right, Glenn has a question. I'm doing some puppetry animation videos and I'm interested in using sound effects. Free is always good, but if paid for products get me a better selection, then I'm in. Yeah, paid will almost always get you a better selection. The question is, how much are you willing to spend? And there are libraries that cost thousands of dollars, and they're really good, but they may not be what you need. The service that I've been using is called, I believe, SoundPop. Is that what it's called? Stand by. I was just working on a movie trailer, and no, it's not SoundPop. What is it called? You'll have to give me a second to look that up, but I do. The reason I use the paid ones and the reason I use this particular one is that you can basically buy a credit, and that allows you to purchase X number of audio clips. And that was actually perfect for what I was doing, because the problem with a lot of the libraries that I've seen, not all of them, but a lot of them, they seem very focused on the types of sound effects you would use in action movies. And I'm generally not doing action movies, so for me, those aren't not quite as useful. But in this particular case, there were some things I needed, and that was really useful there. So apologies for the wait here. I should probably know the name of this company. It just escaped me. SoundSnap is what it's called. Let's just pull that up. Soundsnap.com. Yeah, here it is. All right. SoundSnap. So here's how their pricing works. In their case, you pay X dollars and you get so many downloads. Or if you're going to use sound effects a lot, for $199, you get unlimited. So that's $17 a month. So that's how I do it. Their collection seems very good. The quality of the sound that's coming out of these are very good. I've been happy with them. There are lots of others as well. Rick Veers has one as well. What is Rick Veers called? He's got soundeffects.com. He's got the Blastwave FX. This is an example of, I think Rick does fantastic sound effects as well, but his are a lot of the types of things that I don't generally use a whole lot. So if I were doing more action type things, this would probably make more sense. But in any case, Rick also has that. So I would go to rickveers.com and then actually it's soundeffects.com. So that'll pull that up here. I'm not sure what the pricing looks like on this, but he's got a lot of stuff here. Accordions. He's got some free sound effects too, so if you want to go check those out, that could be helpful for you as well. So hopefully that gets you what you need. Thanks for the question there, Glenn. Alexander, shalom from Israel. Thank you for joining. Oh, my Russian's not so good, but welcome. Thank you for joining us as well. And Lorana Nation is coming at us from Vancouver. Welcome. And Rob from Canada. Excellent. Thanks for your question there, Rob. Jack is recording a gig in Sunderland, but we hope he has a good question. So good luck on your gig there. Hoping everything goes well for you. And yes, we do have a lot of people from different places. All right. Let's see here. Sounds good. Lloyd gives us a thumbs up. Lloyd's good to hear from you again. Thanks for joining us. Okay. All right, here's the question. Is it still true that DaVinci Resolve does not support 32-bit float file formats? So that's what we're going to look into, Daniel. They just released a new version, and again, I'm not clear on whether it translates from 32-bit to 24-bit, and then it's a 24-bit pipeline, or if it actually has 32-bit float support through its entire processing pipeline. That's to be determined, but whatever it is, they have at least made a step, so we'll have more info in the next week here. So, Lorana, when we were talking about cleaning microphones, I'm actually curious what other people use. So you've been using rubbing alcohol. That's a common one. The reason I went to this is I was concerned about the longevity of the cables. So I don't know. I don't know if I have, I'm not claiming that this is like the ultimate answer. It's just what I've been using, and so far good results. So it is very good at getting the residue from the adhesive off, and yet at the same time, it seems like it leaves the cable feeling fairly supple, which is a nice thing as well. All right. We have Nellie's Adventure from China. Welcome. Hope everyone's staying well here with the virus out there. Take your vitamin C. That's not doctor's advice, by the way, just to be clear. Over to Norlis. We have he has a question regarding optimal recording levels for room tone. I'm assuming the gain level will be the same as is used whilst recording the spoken word. Yes, that's precisely what I do. Is that when you call for room tone at the end of a take, you don't want to increase the gain. You want to leave it where it was, is generally what I do. And that's going to make it just easier for post. So I don't know if anyone has different experience with that, but that's generally what I've been doing. All right. Next up from Mark, something called Apple being expensive. Was that the chance? I'm not sure I follow on that one, but maybe I'll get the context here in a little bit. Martin, the distance from mouth chest from actor when using a boom, is it good to be approximately the same when doing retakes, ADRs of the same character actor? Cheers from Buenos Aires. Yes, I think generally that is going to be the case. And again, it's going to depend on the sound you're going for. But yeah, with ADR, well, unless something happened during production where they couldn't get closer, you don't want to match what production did if the production take wasn't good and that wasn't what they wanted, for whatever reason. But yeah, generally you don't want like a close mic sound if it's someone that's supposed to sound farther away. So you're serving the final mix. That's kind of the guideline. Do what's going to serve the final mix. If you want a sound that's a little farther away, then back the mic up a little bit. If you want the kind of the rich, intimate sound, then get the mic a little closer to the actor. So generally you'll match what production did, but if they weren't able to get what they wanted for post, then that's something to consider as well. All right, back to Norlis. What about the sound level for the sound effects in outdoor atmosphere? I'm assuming that the normal -18 is too high for this. I read somewhere that -40 to -30 is good. So this is partly going to depend on your equipment. If you're using a very high quality microphone and a high quality recorder, you're not going to run into a lot of risk of burying the sound in the sound floor. So you don't generally have to be too worried about it. And yeah, generally when I'm using a high quality recorder, a Mix-Pre, a Zoom F series, anything above that, then I'm probably, for an atmosphere, certainly peaking somewhere in the -40 to -30 range without a problem. And I'm not worried about it because I'm not going to be in the noise. I'm not going to be buried in the noise floor. So it's not an issue in that case. But if you are using maybe something that's a little suboptimal, combination of mic and recorder, then you probably want to record it a little hotter. So you make sure you get above that noise floor. Now, microphone distance from the sound source, I think, is important to consider as well. So you kind of need to be thinking about what you want the effect to be in post as well. Do you want, again, a close mic sound? Or do you want something that sounds a little farther away and maybe capture a little bit of the ambiance and the reverberation of that sound is making in the space where you're recording it? So that's where it can be really helpful to do a couple of different takes. So get a nice close mic version and also back off and get another version that's a little farther away. So hopefully that makes some sense and kind of fits in with your experience as well. All right, Rob mentions that, yes, he uses Fairlight and DaVinci Resolve. So that's perfect. So when you do your little test with the two different interfaces or recorders, go ahead and bring those into Fairlight, and you can definitely measure those within Fairlight with the loudness tools. So, all right, Powell, how is it that some mic specs claim very low self-noise, yet they are noisy? I had an SE8 which sounded lovely except for noise and made them useless for me, although they claim 13 dBA weighted. Where's the catch? Well, I think there are a few things that can happen there. I don't want to accuse any particular manufacturers of lying, but I'm not sure they're necessary. Well, first of all, in the specs, if they say 13 dBA weighted, they're using a specific method to measure that. I think that's the part of the problem. They all use different methods. I don't know exactly how the A-weighted noise measurements work exactly, but I would think that's fairly standardized. And I just feel like in a lot of cases, the manufacturers, when they list their specs, they list kind of the same specs that are listed for every microphone, but they may not use the same method to measure them. And maybe some of them are unscrupulous, or maybe some of them measured them on a prototype, or, I don't know. It could be a lot of different things, but there are also other things in your own signal chain that can be a factor there as well. If you have a cable, perhaps, that is contributing some noise, possibly. Although normally with cables, what I've found is it's more of a clearly not working or working. So if you have a short in the cable, you'll get this kind of clicking or staticky kind of sound. And then, of course, lower quality preamplifiers can sometimes make a difference. But I think that probably the most common or most likely answer is that they're perhaps measuring in different ways. So, for example, I actually was working on the review of this microphone here. They actually list the spec on this is for a noise floor of less than 23 dB A-weighted. And I actually appreciated that because that's a horrible spec, to be honest. But it was pretty accurate. It was actually, if you use a good, clean preamplifier behind it, it's actually, if you're on a really tight budget, you can only afford $80 for a mic, you could actually get the job done with this. But I didn't feel like they were lying on their specs, which was really nice. So there are some thoughts there, Paul. I don't know the definitive answer, and maybe some other people do, but there's some thoughts there. UK Media, hello. Thanks for joining us. And the same with Jan. All right, next, Greg. In post, interior shots, do you have a target noise floor dB you try to hit when applying noise reduction? Yeah, my kind of rule of thumb is if there's not supposed to be some obvious room tone, by that I mean something in the room that motivates the picture, then I'm generally aiming to get under minus 60 dB full scale is generally where I'm trying to get. I think for that, you're going to, that'll play back nicely on most systems. Most people's hearing are not going to find an objectionable amount of noise if you get below that. So that's generally my rule of thumb on that. Greg, good question there. Thanks. Thomas, yay regarding 32-bit float in DaVinci Resolve. Downloading now. Let's see how it handles the format. Well, you may have the answer before I do. That is good news. Greg, any rumors on Sound Device's Wave Agent app being updated to support 32-bit? Here is what I heard from Paul. Technically, evidently, you can actually open a 32-bit float file, change metadata, and save it back out, and it will still be in 32-bit float format. What it doesn't support is playback of 32-bit float. That's what Paul told me. Worth checking. I don't know if that also means you can split files up. So, for example, one of the big kind of the benefits of Wave Agent is if you have a poly wave file, you can split all of the isolated channels out, or combinations. You can make a new file without the stereo mix, but with all of the isolated channels, or just the stereo mix, whatever combination you want to do. But from what I was told from Paul, it can still do that. It just has problems playing back. So worth checking. And he didn't say anything beyond that. So I don't know about any, I don't know of any rumors in terms of updating it to actually play back 32-bit audio or be able to do any sort of, the type of thing, the normalization that you would normally do if you're going to a 24-bit or 16-bit format where you'd want to pull everything down, normalize down to recover all of what would normally be clipped sections. So there's some thoughts there. All right. Walter, welcome from Detroit. In terms of post-production sound mixing, again from Norlis here, I recently mixed a couple of things in Fairlight, and there's a second part to this here. I got all the levels to where I thought they should be. Then when finished, I normalized to minus 16 LUFS with a minus 2 dB true peak. It sounds good, but I think the overall levels are too low. Is this because my original track levels weren't high enough? Well, I think here's my thought. So if it's truly at minus 16 dB, or sorry, LUFS stereo, that should be plenty loud in terms of overall perceived loudness. And the test for that is to go get a consumer grade device with earbuds, or maybe put it in your car while you're driving on an interstate. And do you have enough volume on your device to be able to clearly hear what's going on? That's really kind of the test about whether or not you've hit that target. Now, it's a completely different matter if you're trying to get a more sort of kind of in your face sound. If you're really trying to make it impactful in a lot of ways. So that has to do with how you voice the tracks and kind of the processing you do on those tracks. If you want a really impactful thing, oftentimes a lot of compression can really kind of make it a kind of a very impactful kind of experience. So I think you're going to be looking more at things like that as opposed to the actual loudness level, the LUFS level. So that's a completely different thing. That's where mixing and mastering becomes really important. And there is such an art to mixing. A lot of people know how to do it. I'm learning how to do that at a higher level than I have in the past, but there are a lot of things you can do there. Some EQ can make a big difference on that. And it's your overall mix that really kind of changes the impact or the feel of the overall track. But I think you still want to keep, if you're publishing to web, you still want to probably keep pretty close to that minus 16 LUFS. So hopefully that makes sense, Norlis. That's a great question. Bang's Naughty Bits, when using meters, do you use RMS or peak to set your gain? Is clipping the only concern to use peak, or do you only worry about peak when recording? It's a great question. Actually, the Mix Pre and the Zoom F Series have the ability to show both at the same time, and I typically use both. Obviously, the peak to make sure that I'm not clipping, and then the VU part of it, which is basically RMS, to kind of give a sense for how loud it's going to be. So I think the answer for me is both. I think if I could only choose one, I'd probably stick with peak because, again, doing digital audio, I want to stay away from. I want to reserve the limiter on my recorder for rare cases, and that way it sounds much more transparent and cleaner and better. If you're pushing up against that limiter all the time, then it's going to start to sound bad. Limiters are not like a total get out of jail free card. You have to use them right. And from my point of view, the way you use them right is by only letting them engage every once in a while. So if somebody laughs, the very first the attack on that laugh, it should be catching those kind of things and not like every other syllable. If you're catching every other syllable, you're gain too high and you need to come down. So those are some of my thoughts there. I think it's a great question. All right, Bugs, could you briefly explain how the licenses for wireless systems work? Okay, so at a very high level I can. So in each country, the country just defines what can be done at various frequencies. I think that's what you're talking about here. And so typically what we're looking for with wireless microphone systems is we're looking for an unlicensed frequency band that we can operate within. In the United States, I believe that's currently 470 up to about 600. 600 goes away in July of this year, I believe. We used to be able to operate up into 600 and closer to 700, but that's being sold off for other purposes. So what you're looking for is those unlicensed frequencies where you can operate. And when you buy your wireless system, your UHF system, excuse me, you need to make sure that it operates within the section of the frequency band that is legal for unlicensed use in your country. So that's the first thing. Second thing, for the 2.4 gigahertz systems, these are going to be more consumer-oriented systems. That's basically unlicensed in every country that I know of. So that's the frequency that's available for Wi-Fi. And so you're also free to use that for your wireless microphone systems if your wireless microphone system uses that frequency. So the trick with those systems is that if you're doing something absolutely critical, despite all of the very clever algorithms they've started using to frequency hop within that very narrow band, you really don't have any options if things just aren't working out and there's just too much Wi-Fi activity or other activity in that frequency range, then you're out of luck. That's the nice thing about UHF is you can move around if you need to. So that's the general idea. I don't know if that, hopefully that answers your question, gives you some kind of insight there. If you're not sure what frequencies are available, typically your country's your country's government will have a communications commission of some sort. In the United States, it's called the Federal Communications Commission, FCC. They're the ones that define that. So if you go to your country's government sites, you should be able to track that down. Also, any pro audio shop in your country should be able to give you some information on that as well. So thanks for the question there, Bugs. All right, Glenn. As a follow-up question regarding sound effects, I was under the impression DaVinci Resolve was releasing a sound library. Have you or anyone else on tonight heard any updates? I had not heard that they were releasing a sound library, but that the Fairlight panel within DaVinci Resolve has functionality that helps you keep track of your sound library. So basically, it gives you a way to index and find sound effects that you have in your own library that you've created. But I didn't know that they were releasing their own sound effects. But I may be wrong on that. So if anyone else knows better, let us know in the chat here below, or off to the side, I guess it is. So hopefully that makes sense, Glenn. All right, Trevor. Any speculation on Tentacle developing a PC version of Sync Studio? They were cagey about answering any patches. Updates for Tentacle Timecode tool, hoping that means Sync Studio for PC is coming. I haven't heard anything. When I talked to Ulrich, he's the software engineer. He's one of the founders of Tentacle Sync. The short answer was, I only know how to develop on Mac. So I don't know if they've then gone to a third party to develop a PC version. So I haven't heard anything, but I'll definitely keep asking when we meet and talk. Kevin, thank you. So the answer to what we saw before, and I said my Russian isn't so good. The answer is it's hello from Moscow. Well, hello from Moscow, and or hello from the Rocky Mountains in Utah. So thanks for joining us. Daniel says, I hope Resolve supports 32-bit float file format all the way through the pipeline because I use Fairlight in Resolve. I do too, and I'm sure they're headed that way. If this update doesn't do that yet, so hopefully we'll see that before too much longer. Jan says, check the Adobe website. They have an enormous amount of effects in downloadable form. That's good to know. Thank you for that, Jan. I hope I'm saying your name right. Context, you said my Apple box was expensive. Oh, okay. Thanks, Mark. I got it. Appreciate that. Martin, the final mix, fine. Thanks for your answer. Is someone going to be at Cinegear LA this year? I am not currently planning. Well, actually, maybe I will. I don't know. We'll see. Looks like NAB, we were having several manufacturers have pulled out of NAB for this year due to the COVID-19 coronavirus. So Nikon has pulled out, Zaxcom has pulled out, and AJA Systems are at least the three that I am aware of that have pulled out so far. I think a lot of the Chinese manufacturers are going to have a hard time because I think they have some travel restrictions and there are travel restrictions in place between China and the United States. So I don't know whether or not NAB is going to happen or not. That remains to be seen. Cinegear is a little bit later. If NAB falls through, and depending on the climate here in the United States as far as the virus is concerned, I would definitely consider going to Cinegear. No specific plans yet, but definitely some possibilities there. Greg, is compression a normal part of post-treatment of dialogue? When do you use it? That's a great question. I think it depends. It depends partly on your target format. Are you going to cinema? Is your film going to be screened in a proper cinema playback kind of scenario? Or are you mixing for the web? If you're mixing for the web, my experience is in most cases, I will typically at least do some compression just to manage the transients that are really peaky, just to pull those down enough so I can hit my target loudness. But there are cases when you want to use compression in addition to that. So there may be cases when you want to get a certain effect on dialogue. When you have somebody yelling and you want it to really kind of rock the audience a little bit, you might compress it just to make it feel even louder. So there's some definite cases there. Going to web, what I find is most dialogue, most voices need a little bit of transient control to pull those in enough so that you can then loudness normalize to -16 LUFS stereo, for example. So in most of those cases, I do it. In the kind of the more creative or narrative pieces that I work on, that's when I reserve compression for an effect to make the sound or the timbre of the voice change and have a different effect or a different feel for the audience. So those are my thoughts on compression, Greg. Hopefully that makes sense there. All right, Thomas, I just opened Resolve 16.2, imported Sound Devices sample 24, 32-bit files, and it's not obvious what's happening. When I lower the level of the 32-bit file, it doesn't sound clipped, but the waveform looks clipped, so we're not sure. Okay, so it looks like we have some testing. Thomas, thank you so much for doing that while we're live here. I appreciate that. So it looks like we'll be digging into that a little bit more to see exactly what it is doing. All right. Glenn, what is your take on the NTG5 versus the NTG3? Since the prices are the same at my location, I'm torn. Would you say that if I like the more bassy sound or not, what is the biggest difference between them? Well, size is a big difference. Size and weight is a big difference as well. Another difference is that there is the huge difference in the overall timbre. The NTG3 definitely is bassier. It emphasizes bass in a not very natural, but it can be a very pleasing sort of way, depending on what you're going for. Some people love it, some people hate it. So I would say stick to your preferences on that. That's the biggest difference there. The NTG3 also just at a practical level comes with a sort of an aluminum storage tube, which is nice. So if you are traveling with your mic a lot, it's much more. It's certainly more robust than something like. Do I have it here? Oh yeah, much more robust than one of these kind of things. So, in fact, let me grab it and show you. It comes in this really tough aluminum tube, and then it has a screw off top. So this is also useful. Whoops, let me go to the other side. This is also really useful if you're going to be going to a humid environment where you can leave it in here kind of contained and sealed. And then once this has come up to the same temperature, so if you take it outside into the rainforest, you let it get up to temperature. And so any condensation is going to condense on the outside here. And then you can take your mic out and get to work with it. So then you're going to run into less risk of the condensation getting on the microphone capsule. Although that's not too much of a concern with any of the RF bias microphones like this. So in any case, that's another difference between the NTG5 and the 3. I think that if you're, whoa, sorry about that. So those are some of my thoughts. I think the NTG5 to me, again, sounds much more natural, sounds more real life, but the NTG sounds richer. So let your ears and your preferences choose. It's okay. It's okay to like a bassy sounding mic if you like a bassy sounding mic. Don't let anyone else tell you differently. All right. Avinash, is AKG mic C1000S good choice for micro budget starting as independent filmmaking? Also, which audio recorder is good choice for above budget? Just pop that away here real quick. I don't know. Let's see. I haven't used the C1000S. I believe it's a small diaphragm condenser mic. AKG does not make horrible mics. They make good mics. I am actually an AKG fan. I have a C414 XLS that I love for voiceover. I haven't used the C1000S in myself, but if anyone else has used it and you have specific impressions, let us know below. So I think that would probably be a good choice. I would listen to a variety of different reviews, hear different people's voices on it to make sure you're happy with the way that it sounds. I think it could be a good choice. Again, if you're looking for a small budget recorder, the Tascam DR60D Mark II is still, for about $200 at least in the United States. I don't know how much it is where you're at. Still makes for a pretty decent choice. I still prefer that over the H4n, Zoom H4n. But once you get into the H5 and the H6, you're in better territory there as far as overall sound quality and performance of the preamplifiers. Those are my thoughts. everyone else, if you've got advice, I think Avinash could definitely help, and benefit from everyone else's advice as well. All right. I'm DeBrown. Your recommendation between the Deity S-Mic 2S Rode NTG video mic and the Deity D3 Pro to use on a travel boom pole. Well, I think it really depends on what you're going into. Are you going into a camera? Are you going into an audio recorder? And if you're going into a camera, does the camera have XLR inputs? So I would, of all those, I probably would prefer the Deity S-Mic 2S if I could. And you're going to have it on a boom pole, so that's why I say that. The Rode Video Mic NTG is a fine mic. It's made primarily for camera top. Same with the D3 Pro, primarily for camera top, though you can adapt it to work on a boom pole. The problem is well, anyway, give us a little more information, but my preference from what I know so far about your situation would probably be the Deity S-Mic 2S. So, all right, next up from Paul, as I compared an SE8 to an Octava MK012, MXL 60 or 603S and Rode NT5 on the same cables and F8, and they all destroyed the SE8 even after getting it back from service. They claimed they were okay. Lots of white noise, fraud. It could be. It definitely could be. I don't know, Paul, but it sounds like it. If you're getting, an MK012, I don't know the MXL, the NT5 I know, but yeah, it sounds like maybe they're doing something funny with that spec maybe, or you have a bad copy. But if they're claiming it's all fixed and good to go, doesn't sound quite right. So, Kevin, thank you for the super chat from the Peanut Gallery. I hope that wasn't offensive. You do know that was a joke. Obviously, you know that's a joke. Thank you so much, my friend. I appreciate that support. Adam says, is it useless to play around with sound panning when we target videos that will be seen mainly on smartphones? Can we generate a sound report on the MixPre 6.2 using Wingman? And the answer is yes, you can generate a sound report. In fact, we have in my course, we definitely cover that. This is the MixPre course. We cover that. But I think we have a sound for video session where we cover that as well. So yeah, you definitely can produce a sound report. You want to know specifically on the Wingman app. I don't know if you do it from the Wingman app or if you do it on the MixPre. I think you do it on the MixPre. It's the sound devices, the 8 series, 833, 888, and the Scorpio. Now you can actually generate a sound report on the app, which is called the Sound Devices Remote or SD Remote app. So it's a little bit different on Wingman. I think on Wingman you do it on the actual recorder itself, not from the app. 95% sure on that. Is it useless to play around with sound panning when we target videos that will be seen mainly on smartphones? I don't necessarily think so. I think a lot of people are using headphones when they're when they want to seriously listen to something. So definitely not a waste then. I think you want to be careful about being extreme with your panning, because if people are listening and they're getting mono playback, which I think maybe some smartphones still do, I'm not sure, then you may lose some sound. So they may not hear stuff as well if you are panning extremely. Most smartphones now, I think, are probably doing some sort of stereo playback. The problem is they're such a small device that you're not getting really good stereo separation. Yeah, so I see what your point is, and I think that the answer is it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to make something very artful, then I think it's okay to play around with some panning. But don't be surprised if most of your audience doesn't get it, and be careful about doing extreme hard panning one direction or the other, because I think some of that can get lost and muddled up. All right, back over to our friend Norlis. In answer to your answer about levels, yes, the finished files sound pretty good. My perhaps flawed reason for thinking I hadn't got it right is that when I used replay gain on the files, it specified plus 5 dB of gain for a level of minus 18, but I have a feeling these may all be different measurements. Is LUFS something else? Yeah, loudness units full scale is a very specific type of measurement. And also I should say, I almost always say LUFS, but there's also LKFS. I think for practical purposes, they're really kind of the same thing, but I think there are some nuances. But in any case, loudness units full scale is very different than a lot of previous versions and other versions of loudness assessment that different people have used over the years. And I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to so much when you say the replay gain, but plus level of minus 18. It was basically saying you needed an additional 5 dB to hit a target of minus 18. And I assume that was probably like a minus 18 dB RMS is my guess. The problem with RMS measurements is that when there are silent portions, that drastically kind of throws those out of whack. So that's why LUFS and LKFS are kind of they're a step forward in terms of measuring loudness. So if you are, for example, talking about a drama, there are, for dramatic effect, there are often pauses in dialogue or other sound effects. And that's intentional for the effect that the director and the editor and the sound designer are trying to get with that particular piece. And so the problem with RMS is it averages all that silence into the overall reading of loudness, and it totally skews that. So that can be one thing that can really, really dramatically affect things. But LUFS will actually weight the silent portions far lower in the overall measurement of the integrated loudness. And so that's why LUFS and LKFS are more useful from that standpoint. So that hopefully gives you some context there. So yeah, definitely trust those. I at this point in my work, I trust the LUFS and the LKFS measurements because I know that when I put out a piece 2 weeks ago and I put out a piece today, and I set the volume on my playback device, I'm not going to get blown out of the water when I switch from one to the other or have to crank my volume way up. They're very good about managing that. So, and P.S. Thanks for answering the questions. Well, thank you for asking them. I think this is hopefully helpful for everybody that's joining here. Benham says just download the Fairlight library. So maybe there is a library. Very good. Very good. All right. Tommy, happy Saturday. Do you think NAB is going to be a ghost town if it happens this year? Or Sunday, whatever. Yes, it's a weekend. Tommy, it's good to hear from you. Thanks for joining us. I think that NAB, there's a good chance that it's going to be a bit of a ghost town if it does happen. So it makes me a little sad. It's the big show I go to every year, so I don't know, On the other hand, to manage when there's a pandemic, there's some extreme things you have to do as far as having a lot of people in one place. So I think it makes sense as well. So I'm keeping my eye on the NAB, the official NAB site that says, whether it's going to happen or not this year. We'll see if any more. I think what's going to happen is if we start to see the kind of foundation, I don't know what else to call them, foundation exhibitors pull out, like the Canons, the Blackmagics, the Panasonics. If those guys start pulling out as well, then I think there's a better chance that NAB will just say, never mind, we're not doing it this year. But I don't know. I'm not sure. Benham's got talking about the Fairlight library, and he's seen it on the support page. And then Trevor talks about Canada mostly just rubber stamps U.S. standards when it comes to regulations like that. Yes. All right. Rob, thanks for the super chat. Coffee from a junior member of the Peanut Gallery. Hey, we're all equal in the Peanut Gallery, people. There's no junior members. Thanks for the sound advice. Sorry, I know that's the sort of thing you would normally get from Kevin. Kevin, good job getting the Peanut Gallery going today. All right. And I've always wondered how to pronounce, is it Zhao? I've been doing some audio work in governmental buildings in which I have to put my equipment through an X-ray machine to get in. Do you know if that could cause some damage to recorder or the mic? I don't think so. I've traveled with all of my gear and it's all been through the X-ray machines. Maybe someone else knows, but I don't think it typically will. I think you're pretty safe there. I don't know if anyone else knows anything else about that. Tommy, I deleted my earlier question because you already answered it. Anything in lighting you're looking forward to this year? Also, hi. Sure, let's take a detour into lighting. Tommy is probably one of my favorites to go watch his YouTube videos when it comes to lighting gear reviews. Tommy's dove. What's the past tense? It's not divin. He dives. We'll do it present tense. He dives deeply into the audio gear, and he doesn't shy away from some of the higher end gear, which I appreciate. So, for example, I've done some reviews of the Lupo lighting gear on my channel, and the amount of views it just drops dramatically. People want to hear about sound from me, so it's a tough one. But Tommy dives into a lot of that and does comparisons with airy gear, lighting gear, with the Lupos. I know you did some of that. I would say for me, the Lupo gear has become really, really useful, especially in my corporate work. And I used to be kind of down on LED panels. I didn't like them that much because, the beam angle is different on every one of them, and that's still true. But I really liked the single point lights, which are a lot more flexible in terms of being able to use them as hard light and to put a softbox on them and make them soft light. And I still like them, but the problem with those for corporate work is that they're so darn cumbersome, and I'm often working in really, really tight spaces, and so I just haven't been able to fit those that well into those. And so I do a ton of interviews and talking head type sittings, and so in those cases, I'm finding the Lupos work really, really well. And the nice thing about the Lupos is I can turn the fan off. I'm still getting plenty of light output. So I think anything I see from Lupo, I get pretty excited about, to answer your question, Tommy. It'd be really nice if Aperture finally delivers their RGB panel light. They've been talking about that for 2.5 years, almost 3 years now, once we get to NAB. Pardon me. So I'd love to see that as well. They have some neat features on that. And I really love the Sidus Link technology that they have, which is the very best mobile device control app system for lighting that I've seen. I usually hate those things because what you have to do is, the worst case scenario is you have to actually have the light set up a Wi-Fi network, and then you have to change your mobile device to connect to that Wi-Fi network. That's a deal killer for me because that takes way too long. So that's an out. And then if it's a Bluetooth type thing, you have to, you often have to get connected back up to that. That's a little bit of a pain as well. The Sidus Link is just amazing. You open the app and it connects to all of the Sidus Link stuff. Even if you haven't used it for a couple months, it'll take a couple seconds, but the app will take care of it. You don't have to go into your system preferences or settings or whatever on your mobile device. It gets them reconnected and everything's talking to everything. And that is a really cool system. I'm very excited about that. So that's why I'm looking forward to the Aperture RGB panel light. It'll be an expensive one. I'm guessing it's going to be in the $1,500 range, but it'll be super useful if they can finally deliver that darn thing. And it's hard. I know it's hard. I'm a product manager by trade. I know these things are difficult, so I'm not criticizing. I'm just excited for it. So it's a good question there. Okay, we're going to come back to sound here. E67 asks, what do you think about Zaxcom Never Clip technology? Is it better than using a limiter like the one in Sound Devices mixers? The nice thing about Zaxcom Never Clip is that they've built that into their wireless transmitters as well. So I think in that case, it is certainly superior to using a limiter. However, it comes at a cost. And what the cost is that they're recording on the transmitter in the Never Clip format to a proprietary audio format called MARF, Mobile Audio Recording Format. And then once you get into post, you have to convert that over to something that you can use in your digital audio workstation or video editing app. So there's a cost, and that cost is that conversion time. Is it worth it? Depends on your production. If you're doing, I know a lot of people that are working, for example, on reality, they like Zaxcom gear because they have that option. They have the option to save clips, because things get absolutely crazy when you're miking that many people. Usually it's a lot of channels, and you never know what's going to happen. It's not scripted. It's craziness. It's chaos embodied on television. So for them, a lot of people use that. Now, I'm working on narrative type things. For me, a lot of them are small budget narrative type things or corporate things where we generally know where people are going to be, how loud people are going to be. So setting gain is not as much of an issue. And that's actually, to be honest, part of the reason why I've stuck with Sound Devices. I think Zaxcom has some really neat technology. I think they're a smaller company, so I'm not sure how well they're able to turn things around. I mean, I don't know. I just don't have the experience with the Zaxcom gear. At some point, I would like to get to work a little bit more with the Nova, the new kind of smaller form factor Zaxcom mixer recorder. It has some great features and it really looks nice, but it's budget basically that's prevented me from doing that. So for me, Neverclip is not as critical as it is in some other types of work. And for those that are working in the types of work where things are just complete chaos, then I think that's where Zaxcom Neverclip really makes sense, especially if you're going to. That's another thing with the Zaxcom gear. You're kind of buying into a system. It's like buying into the Apple ecosystem. Like the overall benefit of the system is richest when you buy all Apple products. Same with Zaxcom. When you buy the wireless systems from Zaxcom, where they have all that technology, and it all works together beautifully. So that's really the benefit there. So. Thomas, hi everyone. Well, hello. Thanks, Thomas, for joining us. We're going to wrap up here in the next couple minutes. Bangs Naughty Bits, if you are monetizing, speaking the not common cold things name will demonetize your video if YouTube's auto closed captioning detects its various names or pseudonyms in a stream. Oh, okay. That's good to know. Fortunately, this one I don't think is going to be monetized, or if they choose to demonetize. That's a little weird. I don't know why, but they're doing that. But Alexander, I'm working hard on my knowledge in sound and filmmaking, gathering equipment as well. Alexander, thanks for joining us, and thanks for your questions, not just here, but also you've had some, we've been going back and forth in comments. Stick with us. There's a lot to learn, and I'm really excited whenever I see someone who is excited about learning sound, because sound makes a huge difference, especially on lower budget productions. It makes a big difference. So stick with it. There's a lot to learn, but you'll get it, and you'll make some great stuff. Thomas, how is it possible to ask questions ahead of time? I'm in Europe, not always easy to make it in time. Yeah, so a couple of ways. Number one, I'm now announcing these sessions ahead of time. Usually I try to do it at least 12 hours in advance. If you're subscribed to the Curtis Judd Audio YouTube channel, you can go to the About page there. It has my email address there, and you can send me an email ahead of time. Or if you go to school.learnlightandsound.com and sign up there, it's free. As long as you don't opt out of the emails, then I will send you an email ahead of time, and you just respond to the email and you can send your question that way. So thanks for the question there, Tom. Adam says, Glenn, I think the MTG3 sounds more natural and sounds even like the MKH416. I will agree with that. It does sound more like the MKH416 for sure. I'm not sure it sounds more natural, but it does sound more like the MKH416, which is a good sound. If I'll be in the area, is it possible to meet you? Yes, go ahead and contact me. We'll see if we can set up a time to meet. Avinash, I'm super happy with my Tascam DR60D Mark II as a starter prosumer field recorder, and you can get it used for a great price. So yeah, that's a good one there. All right, Bangs Naughty Bits says, they added reports to Wingman app recently. Excellent. I didn't know that, so that's great to know. So I'm going to need to update my mixed pre-course on that. And speaking of the mixed pre-course, we did upload a new segment recently on the new firmware version 6 for the Mix Pre 2 series. You can now actually use it as a 32-bit float audio interface with your Mac. It only works on Mac at the moment, and it's a limitation of the operating systems on the Windows side. But we have a segment on how to set up your Mac to do 32-bit float audio as an audio interface from your Mix Pre 2 to your Mac. You have to be on Catalina 2, by the way, which is the latest operating system. So good news there. Thanks for the super chat, I'm DeBrown. I would use the Travel Boom pole with an external recorder. Sounds like the DDS Mic 2S would be the better choice. That would probably be my choice. I hope that works out well for you. And so that's good news. Good news there. Thanks for that. Lloyd says, Wingman and MixPre, you can input info on either. You need to generate the file from the MixPre. That was my understanding as well, Lloyd, so thanks for that. How many events, seminars, etc. are going down due to the virus issue? I hope it can be controlled soon. I agree. Definitely agree. Caleb's looking for a good all-around mic to record sound effects and dialogue without breaking the bank. I think an NTG5 is a good choice, an NTG3 is a good choice. I think MKH416 is a good choice. You say without breaking the bank. I don't know where the threshold is there for you on that, but yeah, NTG5 definitely fits into that category at $500 with the shock mount, because you are going to need a shock mount. You don't get that with the NTG3 or more expensive microphones. So I think the NTG5 could be a good choice there. Okay. Trevor says it can produce a report from the app, but I think all the data must be input on the Mix Pre. Actually, no, you can input data on the app as well, and then the report can be emailed directly from the Wingman app. Okay, cool. So Lloyd responds, you're right. There's a button to create the report in Wingman. However, you can definitely input info from the app. Agreed with that as well. So we're sorting it out. Thanks, community, for sticking with us here on that. Glenn has a very broad question, I'm afraid, but how does Fairlight compare to Adobe Audition as far as you know, having both software available, so wondering if one is clearly a better choice at the moment? Glenn, I worked with Resolve back in the Resolve 15, Fairlight with the Resolve 15 days when I kind of did a deep dive then, or not a deep dive, but a reasonable, I gave it a reasonable chance. It had some rough edges at that point compared to Adobe Audition. But now it's taken a big step forward, and I'm going to dive into 16.2 and see where we're at now with that. However, what Adobe Audition does have that Fairlight doesn't have is offline processing capability, which is pretty nice. It's especially nice when it comes to doing loudness normalization at the end of your mix. So I still find that a useful tool. So of all the Adobe apps out there, I have canceled my membership for everything except for Adobe Audition. I cannot bring myself to get rid of the Adobe Audition subscription, so it's still $20-some a month for me for that reason, because of the offline processing capabilities. So that's what I'm generally using Adobe Audition for. But other than that, I think that Fairlight's come a long way. What I would do is, if you're trying to make that decision, I would give yourself a period of time, say for the, I don't know how many pieces you produce on a month, for example, but I would give yourself at least a month and say, everything I work on in this month, I have to do in Fairlight, and see if it works for your workflow. If it does, then you could save yourself some money on the Adobe subscription potentially, but that's the way I'm going to go about it again. I'll see if we get there this time. So that's a great question, and I think a really good practical question. Kelper's Dog, mass fan and subscriber, your online courses from Austria here. I have 2 people to interview, but only one NTG5. Should I buy another one or buy an AT4053B for the second person? Thanks in advance. Well, let's get some input from our community here. I think you could go either way and have a good result. I'm assuming that these are going to be indoor. Maybe it would make sense to get an Audio-Technica 4053B, just so you'd have something that's a little better suited. It'd give you more options, maybe, and a different voicing. Now, when you have some people say, well, should I always use the same mic when I'm doing a 2-person interview for both people, one for each person? I don't think that's necessary, unless they sound wildly different. But in those cases there, I think those would be a decent enough match that I think that could work. So I would actually probably go for the Audio-Technica 4053B. Let's see what other people say here. All right, Trevor says, you are correct. For some reason, the app was not allowing me to input any data, but I just got it working. So that's good news. Patrick McKenna, who plays drums, evidently. Fellow drummer. I'm not a good drummer. You're probably a much better drummer than I am, but good to have another drummer here. Hope all is well. When shooting with a Sony a6600 and using the HDMI out to trigger a sound device's Mix Pre 6, is one able to also use an external monitor as well, with say an Atomos Ninja? Oh, this is an interesting one. So I did put out a video some time ago, probably about a year and a half ago, where I was having trouble with that. And the way I routed it was I had the output from my camera going into the Atomos recorder, and then the Atomos recorder has a loop through, so you have another HDMI out port on it to go to the Mix Pre. The problem was that it worked fine with the Atomos, but it wasn't sending the triggering information to the Mix Pre to start its recording when I started recording on the camera or the Atomos. So that didn't work. What some people commented back, and I abandoned that workflow. It just wasn't working for me, and so I still love Atomos recorders. In fact, I've got one down here right now that I use, an old Ninja 2, in fact, an old HD recorder. But the nice thing about this one, it doesn't have any fans on it. I wish they'd go back to that. I understand it's hard because when you're doing 4K, especially at high frame rates, it generates a lot of heat, so on and so forth. But in any case, the people that commented that they did get it working, they were using active HDMI splitters. So they use an active HDMI splitter, feed the cameras, HDMI into that, and then one feed out to the Atomos recorder, a separate one to the mix pre. And then they got the triggering working across the board. So they could press record on the camera, the Atomos would start recording, and the mix pre would start recording. So that was the only solution that we've found so far. If you call Atomos support, what I've heard is that they will generally tell people, we're passing through the trigger codes, so we don't know what's going on the mix pre side. But the mix pre is definitely not getting them. So something's happening in there. I don't know what the answer is, but hopefully that gives you some information you need there. All right, Tommy agrees. The new action panel from Lupo is awesome. I agree. That's the little LED panel that's an RGB, full RGB. Really, really nice. And Aperture's light is going to rock the industry when it finally shows up. Completely agree. All right, Paul says, to what level should I normalize in Audacity? It's 32-bit, no LUFS there. I record choirs in 24-bit, lots of silent portions and big dynamic range. With 0 dB, it is always quiet. What am I doing wrong? So when you normalize to 0 dB, you're doing peak normalization there, Paul. So again, it's really what you should consider. Well, a couple thoughts. With choir music in particular, it depends on what your goal is in terms of where it's going to be heard. The problem is you can compress that, but it's going to start to sound compressed. And I don't know how well, a lot of audiophiles don't like the compressed sound because it will affect the overall timbre of especially a choir. So it will change that dynamic range. And again, yes, choirs have huge dynamic ranges. You may not necessarily need to aim for a -16 LUFS target like we typically do online, because if your audience is going to be listening on a TV with presumably a better playback system, or a computer with some decent speakers, then you'll probably want to retain the dynamic range, not do as much compression, and hit a lower loudness target. Now, in Audacity, you need to check, but there is a free loudness units full scale meter called Youlean, and it's spelled Youlean. Do a search for that. I think it works with Audacity, but it's free, and that will help you to get a read on LUFS there. So I would say that the TV standards for loudness in Europe is -23 LUFS using the EBU 128 standard. That's all. It'll show you that in Youlean. I would start there because typically, at least with dialogue, you don't have to do much compression to get to that target. But see how that does for you on the choir. And that's probably where I would aim. But then you can also experiment with it. Compress harder and get it, normalized up to -16 LUFS stereo and see what it sounds like. You may be surprised. It will probably sound different. So there's some hopefully helpful information for you there. All right, UK Media, what would be your choice for recording live small outside concert gigs to sit on a mirrorless camera? I'd probably go with something like a Stereo Video Mic Pro, if you're just trying to go straight into camera. And you can actually get that off the camera onto a stand, put it up a little bit higher, and aim it down at, whatever if it's coming through a PA system, you don't have to be right on top of it. You can come back some. But that's one way to do it. And I've done that for decent, results there. And you just corrected your spelling there to live, no problem. So hopefully that helps. I don't know if you're talking about a bigger budget, but I've done the same thing with like a Sound Devices field recorder and stereo pair of mics. I have the Rode TF5 stereo matched pair, and that's a really nice setup, but that's a lot more expensive. So there's some thoughts there. Bangs Naughty Bits, Patrick McKenna, you need a LUFS meter. There's a free one called DB Meter 4 and one in the Melda free bundle and one from Youlean. Okay, cool. There are more. I wasn't aware of the DB Meter 4 or the Melda free. So those are worth taking a look at. All right. Sound Device has added that functionality recently. You may have tried before the update, so very good. And Hansang says, thank you. I hope you produce more Fairlight modules. Definitely planning on it. Been a great help. Thanks. Joseph. Just bought a new audio setup, the NTG3 and Zoom F6. Thanks for helping me make my choices. Keep up the good work. Josef from Sweden. Well, thanks so much. I'm glad that's a great kit. In fact, that's the exact combination that I used when I recorded the F6 review. And so, yeah, that one's a really nice combination. So hopefully you get out there and make some great sound. So we're going to wrap it up today. Everyone, thanks so much for joining us. Hope you get out there and make some great sound and also stay healthy. We'll talk to you again next week. Take care, everybody.